thereabouts, Jen.
Yeah, 18 months getting this manuscript, this remarkable manuscript from outstanding to excellent. And over that time, we learnt quite a bit about each other. I was also Jim's editor, and that was quite a sort of merry process, Jim, wasn't it? Can you want to talk to us about that?
Yes, well, Jen, as well as being my publisher, she was my copy, or I think late stage editor, I think is a better description, because it was more than just copy. There was some spirited discussions, and it was a you know, I look back on those discussions so fondly, because I could, you know, after, as Josephine said, the best part of 30 years, I could see the final shape of the work, and you know, that was exhilarating.
And what emerged, wasn't it? It was sort of a bit obscured at the beginning.
Yes.
And we had to nut it out.
Yes.
And,
yes.
And naturally, as a writer, that can be very challenging.
Yes. Yes.
I think your wife told me at one point at the launch that you had come home from that initial meeting saying, "I'm not changing a word."
Did she say that? I'll have to take that up with Tanya.
Something like that. But, you know, and I understood too that this was a huge step. I'm a writer myself, as many people in the industry are, and I know the heart and soul that goes into a work, particularly when it's been nurtured for so long and been through so many almosts. And not quites and so on, and still remained the superb manuscript that it was. So 28 years, Jim. I'm not sure if that's a Victorian or national record, but it must come pretty close to. Can you tell us about the journey to words that that Nikolai the Perfect went through? Because he was Nikolai the Almost Perfect for quite some time.
Yes, and
then we had to kick him along the
28
road.
years, yes.
So tell us about that journey. Well, how did it start?
Okay, so how it started, I was one of the, well, not one of the first, but most of you might have heard of the RMIT. Back then it was called the Advanced Diploma in Creative Writing. So I enrolled in that in the early 90s, and the class teacher, who was Stephen Carroll, who was also a much awarded novelist, set a class exercise for a short story, which I duly completed, and I sent away to some competitions and won a prize in commendation. And one of the judges' comments was that it read like an excerpt of a much longer work. So I thought, aha, I'm onto something here. And so I worked on it off and on. There were periods of more than a year, 2 or 3 years, where I simply left it aside. That was mostly when, around the time my 2 kids were born. Then
that makes you very normal. You realise?
Yeah.
That,
oh yes. Yeah.
2 years of sleep deprivation.
That's right. Yeah. There was any sort of proper writing was out of the question, as any parent knows. Then in around 2001, I sent it off to a friend, Leat Kirby, who had a manuscript assessment service. And Leat wrote back a very encouraging report. And I thought, okay, I need to get a bit more serious and a bit more disciplined. And so I found more hours somehow. Then in 2005, I was offered a studio at Abbotsford Convent, and I had 9 wonderful years there. And
which gives you a writing space, doesn't it?
Yes, so that's I had a studio,
discipline.
And yes, and more than that, a community of like-minded souls.
Right.
and people, other writers whose opinions I respected.
And who are on their own journey of
That's
with
right.
the urgency or not that
Yes.
goes with that.
Yes, yes. So that was indispensable. But at the, you know, for all that, you know, there were many times, many days, and sometimes weeks on end where I thought, this is an indulgence. You know, I need to rejig my priorities. I need to actually, you know, see some result. And just when I was at the point of, you know, giving up something, I'd get some affirmation like a grant or a short listing or long listing in a novella competition for Griffith Review. That was 2012. So, you know, I was, you know, when people ask me, can you pass on any advice? The important thing is just to keep turning up. Just keep turning up.
At it.
Just keep at it.
And so another 10 years went by. What happened in 2015?
So I thought, 2015, I thought, okay, I'd done the rounds of all the publishers and then some, and I got encouraging responses, but, you know, sorry, it's not for us this time. So I entered it in the Victorian Premier's, Unpublished Manuscript Award, and that was really the last chance saloon. You know, if nothing had happened from that, I think I would have just about given it away. And I was shortlisted and, as Jen mentioned, equal runner-up to Jane Harper's The Dry. And
we all know what's happened to Jane Harper's The Dry. So a veritable runner-up to a very fair win in that situation.
Well, yes, you know, it's really
still very
an honour.
encouraging.
Yeah, an honour to, you know, come second to Jane, of course.
And then what happened? How did the publishing industry react to that? That runner-up,
well,
that accolade?
There was a flurry of open doors, and an agent contacted me, and this was all in the week before, because they got hold of the 3 shortlisters, including myself. They contacted me saying, please, we'd love to read your work. So I thought, oh, here we go. I've arrived. So I sent it off, and one by one, those doors closed.
Once they'd seen the manuscript.
Once they'd seen the manuscript, and you know, they didn't spell it out, but my sense was they just didn't think it would sell enough. They just didn't think. So that
roll forward to leave the misery behind. Roll forward to 2020. Well, I think it was actually towards the end of
2019. So
yes.
And yeah, I'd reached the point of
it was languishing.
It was languishing, and I'd all but given up. Then Kate Ryan, who was a writer friend from the convent, introduced me to Jen. So I sent the work to Jen. You know, Jen and I met for the first time, I think, in November 2018 from memory. She asked me to make or consider some changes, and that wasn't a difficult thing to agree to, because I was at the stage where I couldn't, you know, I didn't have the luxury to be precious or obstinate about accepting advice. So worked at it over that summer. We met again February, March. She offered me a contract, and you know, we thrashed that out, and then the editing process began in earnest. And it started with, my particular process was, and I think it worked very well, was we split the editing up into structural editing, which is the big picture stuff. Kate Ryan did that, did a wonderful job, and Jen took over as copy editor. But again, the copy editor doesn't quite do her role justice. There were, you know, much more.
It's the nitpicking word by word process that every writer has to go through, where every single word on the page, regardless of its length or syntax or position in the sentence structure, has to work and must contribute. Otherwise, it doesn't need to be there. It's a type of, it just happens to be that I like that work, and it's a joy, because often when the structural work is done, the beginning's in the right place, the middle's in the right place, and the end's in the right place, which is not always where it's, how it's, often, as often as not how the writer originally started out. Then a book needs to be structured for the reader to hear it, which is also not a voice the writer is used to projecting, because when you're writing, you have your funnel of creativity pouring onto the page. You're not listening to what you're writing the way a reader is listening to it in their own head. So there's quite a sort of schizophrenic transformation that needs to take place in getting a big piece of work, or any piece of work, to the polished stage where it's ready to go out into the world. And I remember we really pushed quite hard on that, didn't we? It was like Christmas Eve that year. You know, we were running down the wire to the wire was running down to the holidays, and we pushed to get that done. It was a big achievement.
It was, you know, there were dawn to dusk days.
And the rest of it was pretty much housekeeping, you know, getting the book cover done. A magnificent book cover, also by a Williamstown resident, Sandy Cull. She's an award-winning book cover designer, and we were delighted to have her support. And again, that was because of the network of your writing network through Abbotsford Convent, I think. Yeah. Yes. So as you've mentioned, that cohort is enormously important to a writer.
Yes,
isn't it?
Yeah, indispensable for me. I couldn't have got to where I am without it.
And I think for most writers, Nikolai the Perfect is set in Moscow and Melbourne, as Josephine summarised, and it's based around, the Moscow end of it is based around events of the early 1990s. And can you explain your relationship with Russia and the reason you were able to write so acutely about those events?
Well, I actually did two trips. First one in '92, and the second one was I spent 6 months in Moscow, the second half of 1993.
And can I just interject? Sure. McIntyre is a name that we would associate with Culloden, perhaps, or the Outlanders, rather than Moscow and the early 1990s. So what generated your original interest in Russia and Russian?
Clearly someone's not told me something.
You think it's in your blood?
I think so. I think I'd have to thank two inspiring teachers who piqued my interest in Russian literature, and I did the Russian Revolution for HSC.
For as long as the revolution went on.
For as long as the revolution went on. And then in the 80s, I got really interested in the changes underway there, particularly the opening up, you know, the sort of stuttering introduction of freedoms, and I was being much more idealistic then. I was sort of barracking for Gorbachev, who was the president at that time, to
the change
succeed.
maker.
The change maker, you know, he represented the changes to succeed.
And so you went there.
And so I went there, and I'd also, I just before the first trip, I started to learn Russian. And
easy language?
Complicated but logical.
I was sort of joking. For those of us who aren't so inclined, it appears impossible.
Well, I've taught a little bit of Russian myself, and once you learn the alphabet spooks people. You know, that's a big hurdle jumped. So yes, I started to learn sort of on and off, and when I was in Melbourne for most of that time until about 98, and that was a bit frustrating because I didn't really have a use for it. And then in 98, I registered as an education agent for Swinburne University, which meant I needed to go and base myself there. So that was sort of the pretext.
Inviting Russian students to Australia,
yes.
to the Australian campus.
Yeah, bringing them out to study. It was you could do it in those days. I was more or less a de facto migration agent.
Right. And anybody in your family you brought back with you?
Yes, I met my partner Tanya in Moscow. She's born and bred there, and our first son Daniel was born there in 2001. And after he was born, we decided that we would come out here, and we've been here since end of 2002.
So, Jim, the scenes in Nikolai the Perfect of civil unrest are written in quite a visceral and direct way. Are those works of your imagination or summaries of your experiences in Moscow?
The scene set in October 1993, which was when there was a sort of a counter coup, an attempt to go back to Soviet dictatorship. I was there during that time, so there was 4 or 5 days of mayhem, and I happened to be in an apartment that looked directly over the Parliament building, the White House, so I could actually see the top stories of the White House was actually set on fire, and it looked like a toaster with the bread left in too long, and there was this smoke pouring out of the building, and at the same time there was all this sort of there were snipers on the street, and it was it wasn't safe to go out. So yes, that was to some degree an eyewitness account. A lot of the stuff that I wasn't around to witness, I guess I created out of imagination plus really
an intense understanding of the history
and very painstaking research.
I think also one of your characters in that lockdown situation was created. Well, during that lockdown situation, you had interaction with a woman who then became a character in the building that your character Vasily and
yes.
Anna live in.
Yes.
Is that something, using direct experience of a character, the attributions, the way of speaking, the slovenliness of this woman and her her dirty mouth and her greed? Is that something that, as a writer, springs immediately to you when you're writing a character? I know that's where she came from because you explained it in another setting. But is that common as a writer when you're developing a character? How closely do you go into your own experiences?
I I think the shortish answer is quite deeply into my own experiences. With this particular character was, as Jen said, was straight out of real life. She was my landlady at the time of the counter coup, and she behaved to me exactly as I described her. So it was a case of writer's revenge, I suppose. That she was too irresistible a person not to use as a character.
Yeah, she's done very well. She's done well. And your main character, Vasily, how did you had to transfer Vasily create a plot that transferred Vasily from Moscow to Melbourne? Was that something that happened in year one of the 28 years, or did Vasily grow with you?
That actually, the core of the short story I mentioned earlier in the talk is about Vasily arriving in Melbourne and feeling lost and alienated. So that's the germ of the book, and it sort of, the rest of it sort of flourished around that.
It blossomed from that point.
Yeah.
That point. It's a singular experience. Did you, when you arrived in Moscow as a young man, what sort of reception did a raw, youthful Australian receive from Russians at that time?
For the most part, I received a very warm reception. I was a bit exotic.
Yes.
You know, there weren't too many Australians in Moscow at that time
who spoke Russian.
So, you know, that was that was curious to people I encountered. With Vasily, when I developed and refined him, I tried to imagine what it would be like for someone about my age at that time, coming to a place where, without giving the plot away, he didn't really want to go, but he felt obliged for reasons you'll read about, and what it was like for him, you know, in you know, landing in Melbourne and you know, somehow making his way.
Needing to function.
Yes.
I mean, not only just being essentially sent there, exiled there, but with a mission that he didn't understand, and needing to function in an environment he wasn't comfortable in. It's and no spoilers here, so it's quite remarkable the way this is done. And just a comment, the contrast that Jim creates in Nikolai the Perfect between Moscow, which is icy and cold and politically invasive and not very safe at that time, and challenging because of the deprivations that not only the political situation forced on this young man at that time, but also the deprivations caused by the civil unrest. And the contrast with Melbourne, which when I first read it, was leafy and green, but also incredibly well written. I could actually follow the line. In fact, when we were editing, I followed the line of his eye, of this character's eye, as he went along Punt Road. And I know that area so well. I could tell Jim, I think you got the left-hand turn too early. I think it's one block onwards. And the question I want to put to you is, this was also written, Melbourne University and the campus and Carlton, and I could see the area around Melbourne General Cemetery and the extension of Lygon Street and so on. Was this also straight from your experience, or did you have to research that and go and map out Vasily's life in Melbourne?
I did have to do a lot of
foot slogging.
Foot slogging, yes. There's a scene a bit later where he takes the train from Melbourne to Lilydale, and I took that trip 3 or 4 times to note the details and to try and see the cityscape, the terrain,
yes.
as he might see it,
as a stranger
might see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mount Evelyn features in the book, doesn't it? Was that a random pick?
Yes and no. In keeping with my careful research, he doesn't have a car, so of course he has to go there on public transport, and the bus from Lilydale Station goes through Mount Evelyn. So
needed somewhere.
So I needed, needed somewhere.
Yes. And it's quite a romantic and semi-exotic vignette within a fairly ordinary setting. So it has a powerful appeal, and we won't go any further with that because the details are in the book. But there is a powerful pivot that is associated, a pivot in the plot, an unfolding, a resolution that takes place in Mount Evelyn. So it's very important. Jim's done an amazing job of making sure the reader is carried along with the emotion that the character needs to have created in his heart, in his head and around him, in order for those scenes to work. Because with no disrespect at all to the suburb of Mount Evelyn, it's not a very sexy part of the city. And without those very clever and experienced writing attributes, it could have come a clunker. And I don't think I've ever said that to you, but you've taken the ordinary, which so often outstanding writing does, takes the ordinary and makes it extraordinary. Extraordinary things happening to ordinary people, and ordinary places taking on the extraordinary because of the lens through which the writer is able to view them.
And that was one of the, just adding to that was, I think, amongst the most enjoyable parts of the writing is, I love trying to bring mundane places and places that we take for granted to life in new ways.
So we've had quite a time now. You've had quite a time now, not relaxing. I was tempted to say relaxing. You've been doing a lot of work. We've been doing a lot of work getting the word about the book out and about and talking to groups of people. What's that doing to your writer's life? Where's your focus now? I always think of that story of a writer in America, and she's quite, I think it's Anne Mott, who tells a story of a colleague of hers who was a debut author, who went through a process of stopping people in her local town, stopping people outside the bookstore after they'd bought her debut novel, asking them if she could sign the book and could she just change a word on page 112. That it's often quite difficult to leave the baby behind. But I understand that you've accomplished that quite carefully. Nikolai is now perfect and launched and out in the world. What about your writing life now? What's in your mind, and where's it taking you at this point? Or are you happy to hang up the spurs for a while?
I've hung up the spurs for a year, and that's in large measure due to lockdown. But I actually I find it really impossible at the moment to be creative in Melbourne. But just last weekend I escaped to Warrnambool and got back to a novel that I started after the 2015 award. This is a historical novel. I have a thing about Nikolai Evenly because my character's name is Nikolai Maklai. He was a celebrated Russian-Ukrainian anthropologist, linguist, a real one. So this is a real
person.
Anthropologist who spent 18 months in Papua New Guinea learning the languages and the ways, and fetched up in Sydney, married the daughter of the 4-time Premier of New South Wales against the Premier's wishes. So he's quite a guy. I have my subject. I had the weekend just gone was something of a breakthrough, I suppose.
You refound your muse.
For now.
Well, you're writing.
Yeah, I'm writing again. That's the important thing. And I did. I did, as Jen knows. I gave serious thought to hanging up the keyboard. But once
a writer,
I don't think you can actually retire. That's the thing.
No, but however, the disclaimer is you haven't got another 28 years to write the second one.
That's right. So not a moment to lose.
There needs to be something else happening.
Yes.
So we're going to presume that what's next for Jim McIntyre is more writing, whether it's short stories or a long form, which is important because Nikolai the Perfect is an outstanding book and is a very worthy, deserves a worthy place on the bookshelf. But very lonely on its own. Jim McIntyre is any writer who can produce that standard of book should be spitting one out every 18 months or 2 years. And I think that probably comes down to 500 words a day for at least 4 months of each year, and then the polishing.
That's roughly the equation.
Yes, but so which really isn't all that much. But it's not overwhelming when you use that philosophical viewpoint of a journey of 1,000 words starts with a single journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Yes, so the journey of 1,000 pages, or 300 pages even, just starts with paragraph by paragraph by paragraph, and there's endless discussion around what writers do and what each writer does. It's one of the most common questions of what a writing day looks like. And yours, of course, you've had the privilege of a room you can go to away from distractions and commit to a time. There are other writers who would write anywhere in a bus stop or a coffee shop and do. But there are, people, and you're one of them, who needs that quiet, detached space. We've got some time for questions. If there's anybody who'd like to have an unmuted talk about their own writing, or a question for Jim, or a question for me, it's your time. The next 10 minutes are all yours. Are there any questions there?
Thanks, Jen. Any questions at all?
Any budding writers in the group? Gail, I think you've put your hand up. You'll have to unmute yourself before we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can't. We can't see you. Any chance we can see you?
Oh, I'd rather not.
Okay, it's your choice. But we can hear you. That's the important thing. What's your question or comment?
So, Jim, you must have been disheartened for a lot of the time when you were trying to get your work published. And maybe that's why it sounds like you got a bit put off writing. And I read that you have a full or part-time job in a home. Is that right?
At the moment?
Yeah.
I'm a full-time, I'm the aged care social worker at the Russian Ethnic Representative.
Yeah. If you had a choice, would you like to just be a full-time writer, or do you like doing, obviously you probably do like what you're doing, but I mean, would you like to be a full-time writer?
I'd love to.
Out novels?
Yeah, I'd love to. Love to be a full-time writer if it, if it paid the bills. It's a challenge, as we know. Yes, absolutely.
Have you got any ideas, Gail?
It sounds like you have to be living overseas.
Well, I don't know. I think bills have to be paid wherever you are, and we live in.
Well, apparently people make a lot more money publishing books overseas. Is that right?
No.
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 No. Okay.
I wish it was right. I mean, there'd be somewhere we could go and bay at the moon if that was so. But no, it's a difficult industry, and it's a very difficult time in the industry just at the moment. I mean, publishers are doing it, although a lot more people are reading. There are a couple of observations I could make. If you probably know and have noticed that if you walk into a bookstore in, let's just say in Victoria, as an example, it wouldn't matter whether you're walking into a bookstore in Williamstown or Warrnambool or Warragul, you will see the same books on the bookshelves. And that homogeneity is mainly because publishers, particularly now, first of all, publishers own 95% of the distribution channel, so they can dictate to bookstores. And the other thing is, just at the moment, because there's so much economic pressure on the business model in publishing, publishers are being very risk averse. So they're releasing books from from writers they've already released books from, basically. So there's a new age of what's known as the mid-lister, person who's written 2 or 3 or 4 books, and none of them have been bestsellers, but they've been, tidy enough. They've washed their own face, paid their own housekeeping for the publishing company. They are the writers whose next manuscript is being picked up. It's more difficult now than it's ever been for the debut writer, or for somebody who doesn't have a name. You may be someone who's never written a book, but you've got 200,000 people on a Facebook as Facebook followers, or you're a big tweeter, or you're famous in your own lunchtime for something completely unremarkable, but somehow these are the people whose books, because they're safe, it's an economic consideration. So for writers like Jim and like thousands of others who either don't yet have their next book, but Jim now has his first book, so that's a huge leap forward in terms of qualifying to have a publisher listen next term around. We focus completely on the work of mature age writers, not necessarily retired or older writers, but people who have come to their writing through or beyond or around other professions, and often from within other professions. We have a vet, I've got an emergency physician coming through at the moment, an ex-photographer, an award-winning photographer, and so on. These are people who didn't go to undergrad creative writing classes and then work in a bookstore and keep writing and stay connected from their campus onwards. But it's not easy. It's not easy, and it's not going to change anytime soon, because the world, as you know, has changed so rapidly, and we live in very unusual and unpredictable times. So many of the lines of communication that we, for example, and many publishers use with their community, which is through libraries, but libraries now, as we're doing now, electronically rather than in person, have changed, and the way people receive information has changed, and the industry is going through a massive readjustment. At the same time, there are 15,000 books a month released in Australia, and 1 million books a month released annually. 1 million books a year released annually globally. It's and that's a good thing, and it's also overwhelmingly difficult at times for the newbie writer to get cut through. So there's the reality check.
Jim, at any point in the process, did you ever consider self-publishing?
I did, not long before Jen came along. I met someone I had a studio at Glenford in St Kilda for the last 5 years, partly through the award. So he was there, and he was he set up a self-publishing operation, and appeared to be doing quite well. So we had a couple of fairly long discussions, and but I think I think to do that well, you've got to have a good grasp of IT, for example, which I don't.
And marketing.
And marketing.
You've got to hustle. You've got to
I was
hustle.
about to say, I suspect it's a harder slog, Jim.
Yeah, it is a hard slog.
So I thought, no, I don't think it'll work for me.
I mean, the manufacturing of a book, in its simplest, if you bring it down to the lowest common denominator, it's a pretty simple, straightforward process. And if you have a finished manuscript, you can load it on Amazon for about $80. And whilst Amazon do put some technical barriers to you messing up the production aspects of the book, they take no notice of the content of the book. So the backlash in the market to self-publishing over the last, which really was unheard of until about 9 or 10 years ago, and the backlash from those early years has been quite powerful, because a lot of people uploaded junk that wasn't, or just unfinished work that hadn't been edited, or their sister edited it for them, or the mother said they loved it, so they thought, okay, it's ready to go. I mean, all those stories. And so that's made it even more difficult for self-publishing.
Genuine self-publishing.
Yes, but that's not to say, as in everything, you know, Leanne Moriarty started out, we all know her, she's an international household name, not just in Australia, even though she is Australian. She could not get success in Australia, and she self-published her first book, and it was then picked up by, I think Doubleday is her, or Hodder and Stoughton, anyway, and it picked up by an international, after it was out there, and had been out there for 3 years, and it hadn't done amazingly well, but it had picked up a following, and she'd put a sequel to it, and you know, the rest is history. So she was like a 12 or 14 or 15 year overnight success, when finally the industry began to understand that here was an unknown debut and a follow-up who was actually walking the walk and talking the talk. But it's not easy, and it's not natural for many personalities, and often writers are reflective and quite, you know, often loners who find the idea or the concept of selling their book quite difficult. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but certainly the technological pathways are easier and easier as time goes by.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've still got 10 minutes. Happy to take more.
Well, I think I've asked you just about everything that we've been through at any of our sessions, Jim. Is there anything else that you think that you would like to volunteer about this whole experience?
I think the most important, you know, when I look back on it, the most important thing for me, although you know there's been a few setbacks of late, the most important thing for me is it's out in the world.
And nobody can take that away from you.
That's right, and you know, whatever.
And it's beautiful. And
thank you. And I you know, whatever. I just, you know, reminded myself that whatever else comes along is a bonus.
What a great note to finish on. You know, with all the shutdown and reopening and the scrambling and the readjustment and how we're going to manage this and what's the next step forward. What a great way to, what a great attitude. Well done, Jim.
Thanks, Jen.
Exactly. And look, I have started reading it. And the first thing that struck me, Jim, was your use of language. And And that comment you made, taking the ordinary and turning it into extraordinary, your use of language has done that immediately. And now listening to you talk, I'm really keen to just get home, have a cup of tea, and keep reading.
That's lovely. Thank you.
I'm in the same boat, Jim. I've read about 70 pages of it, and I'm keen to read the rest of it now, having listened to you.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, and it's very well written indeed. And the attention to detail about Russian society is extraordinary. For someone who speaks like you do as an Aussie Australian, it's pretty amazing. So well done. And let me also say, as a retired social worker, it's not a bad way to make a living as a social worker. I wouldn't be ashamed of it by any means.
Oh, no, not at all. Oh, no, I actually like my job very much.
Yeah.
Very good. I guess you get a chance to speak Russian, obviously, with your
I
clients.
do. I'm lucky enough to get to chat with people in my second language. And they've done every day, and they've done these are ex-politicians, engineers, musicians, extraordinarily accomplished people who've been through so much, endured so much. So what's not to like?
There'd be another book there, I would think.
Yes.
When you get through the second one.
Yeah.
Many a short story from.
Yes.
Indeed. Yes. Wealth of material.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the other thing that you were saying, Jen, too, about the mature writer, there's life experience in those words. And so that's another element that comes out in writing when it's a piece of work written by a mature aged author. And so those life experiences are just unique. And also that window that you've got, Jim, you've made me try to think back to that period of time when Gorbachev was in power and when things were changing dramatically. From my perspective, and maybe Martin and some of the other people here, we were watching all of that on the news. But to be there, to have lived that experience and then to bring your perception of it and your character's feelings in that moment, I think is a great way for us to rethink and remember that period of time, which would have been, was huge. It was a huge point in time and history for not only Russia, but the world.
Not only Russia.
Yes.
So there's a whole lot of different elements happening in there.
I would think, Josephine, of books that, in my mind, they fall into various categories. Jim's Nikolai the Perfect is not only a good read, it's a really good reading experience. And I think that's what divides a good book from an outstanding book. Nikolai the Perfect is a reading experience of language, of the richness of description, of the depth of character, of the personal experience and the growth of the characters. Vasily has to evolve in this book, or it would end in a death. And in his death, I mean, he's a young man who is in a flip-flop of immaturity and in a situation that requires sensitive, empathetic application of intelligence to get where he needs to be. Only he doesn't know where he needs to be. I mean, it's amazingly complex. It's
like most of us in our lives.
Yeah, like most of us at certain times in our lives. It's a coming of age book in the sense of the movement of a young man from dependent lack of adulthood to independent maturity, stumbling along. It's very honestly written about what he goes through. And thank you very much for having us here.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. It's been, and Jen too, thank you. It's been an insightful hour and exploring your novel and the intricacies of actually writing one. So I'm sure, as Martin and I both said, you'll be inspired to explore the book even further, and also for hopefully some of us to explore the art of writing and not to give up on the process, oneself, or the story that you are nurturing. So to the audience, thank you for your participation and genuine interest in Jim's work and the novel. We hope you've had the opportunity to attend a number of events from the comfort of your own lounge, thanks to our lockdown. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly put a link to a survey that I hope you can all do and send to us as feedback. And at this point, I'd like to announce that Martin and Charlene are the winners of the book. So if both of you could send us your details, write to, I'll just put this email in the chat as well. And if you could just write to us at this email, and then we'll get those copies to you both. And thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the libraries at the next Saturday Book Chat. Thank you again. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being in, everybody.
Bye-bye. Pleasure. Thank you.